time once again for Community Forum, and we're very lucky to have with us live in the studios this morning, Maru Mora Villalpando. Maru Mora Villalpando is with Latino Advocacy and also with the NWDC, Northwest Detention Center, Resistance. Maru, thank you very much for coming in and spending time with us this morning.
Thank you so much. Good morning.
So start out, tell us about the NWDC Resistance and how you became involved.
Well, I was back in September, October of 2013, where we saw young people and their parents and other adults, undocumented people, deciding to go on the offense in regards to deportations. So I witnessed a lot of people in Arizona, especially, organizing how to stop deportation buses, especially the streamline operation down in Arizona in the border with Mexico. And I witnessed how they put their bodies on the line and decided to stop the buses themselves. So I got really inspired, and I felt that Washington State lacked the attention of what it is, the Northwest Detention Center that was built in 2003 and opened in 2004. So I called several people, I emailed several people, and I say, hey, you want to do this with me? Let's shut down the detention center for a day. Let's stop deportations for a day, and let's show that undocumented people are also going to take the lead in Washington State. So it was in February of 2014 that we came together to stop deportation buses right outside the detention center. There were 10 of us shutting it down, obviously with a big team of like 20, 25 other people coming together. We were able to stop 2 buses and 1 van from leaving the detention center. We were really excited. One of the vans, we had eye contact with the people that were in the van, and that led to the largest hunger strike we have ever seen so far in a detention center. 2 weeks and a half later, over 1,200 people went on hunger strike on March of 2014, and they called us and say, hey, help us. You were outside, you were blocking the streets. Let's work together. And so that's how the Northwest Detention Center Resistance was born. It was born in response to the leadership of people detained, and that's what we've been doing since March of 2014.
So talk about the facility itself. It's considered an ICE facility, yet it's private. It's run by GEO.
That's right. It does belong to GEO Group. It's a very large corporation. It's one of the largest in the world that manages and owns prisons, private prisons. And here they actually bought the building from another company, and now they own the building and they manage the building. So the building was constructed during obviously the Bush administration. We know that the company that actually built it was a subsidiary of Halliburton. And so it all ties back to the Bush administration and the government of at that time. Now it operates under the guidance of Immigration Customs Enforcement, which belongs to the Department of Homeland Security. So it is a private entity, it's a private enterprise. ICE is rarely there. I mean, we've been there for a long time, and we see them not often. As a matter of fact, people detained also said they don't get to see their own ICE deportation officers as often as they should. The facility has expanded 3 times. It started with like about 500 people capacity. Now it has 1,575 people capacity. It obviously opens the door to other corporations because everything is private in there. So the commissary is run by a company called Keefe. The telephones are run by a company called Telmate. The email service is run by a company called smartjailmail.com. So there's several companies that come together to make money out of the imprisonment of our brothers and sisters in there.
So as of today, September, you have already this year had numerous hunger strikes. The hunger strikes appear to be what is one of the few things that gains any traction in corporate media. Can you talk about the current situation there?
Yes, I think we have counted so far 5 hunger strikes since April 10th this year. It's really surprising because you would expect that under this fascist regime that we are now, people would be even more afraid to go on hunger strike, to do any kind of demonstration in such a terrible conditions. But actually, it's the most active year we have had since 2014. So the conditions have not improved. ICE has always used Northwest Detention Center as a model facility. When people get transferred to other facilities, do say that things are worse in other places, but if people have done so many hunger strikes here, you can imagine just the worst conditions that they face in other places. Right now, we have at least one person, not only on hunger strike, but he also decided not to drink water. This person is part of a group of about 50 Cubans we're in touch with. This group of people, it took them about a year to get to the southern border with Mexico and the United States. They had to go through different countries before reaching the United States border. And during that time of their traveling, that's when Obama was still in office and decided to get rid of the policy that allowed for any Cuban that landed or put a foot in this territory to actually receive immediate asylum and immediate, like we said, papers. So that changed under the last year of the Obama administration. And as they come in, now they're placing deportation proceedings. Of these 50 Cubans, the vast majority came with their families, wives and children, and most of them have been released except the men. They were detained in Rio Grande, but the men were transferred all the way here to Washington State. And as they arrived, they're told, oh, you're going to be free on parole, don't worry, because Cuba doesn't accept them. They're not deportable. And then it happens that 1 month goes by, 2 months go by. It's almost 4 months now for some, and they're not released. Some of them have not even been granted an interview with ICE. Vast majority of them passed something that is called credible fear interview, which is an interview that is done to people asking for asylum to see whether their request to stay and their fear of going back is real. And so most of them have passed that. So as a matter of fact, yesterday there was a hearing where this guy that is still on hunger strike attended, and we were there. The judge was baffled. She didn't know why this guy was not granted parole. She didn't know what to do. She basically said, I'm confused. I don't know what Homeland Security doesn't let you go. And he said, well, if you're not going to let me free, why don't you just deport me? And he said, I'd rather die than continue being in here. You lied to me. The United States keeps claiming that this is the land of the freedom. And I arrive, and the first thing you guys do is to keep me in detention, in indefinite detention. When he restarted his hunger strike, he had been only 24 hours, and he was sent to isolation, to solitary confinement. He was even shown a tube that they will use to force feed him, to scare him. This is another threat that we've seen again and again during hunger strikes. In the hunger strikes back in April, we saw how people were retaliated against by being transferred to a county jail in Oregon called Norcor. The main, what ICE believe the main organizers, which are just people that try to be treated as human and they want to keep their dignity. A couple of them were transferred to Florence, Arizona. So there's a lot of retaliation on how ICE handles people trying to be, to keep their humanity. People that are not gonna just take ICE threats and just give up. And so they have been transferred. Some people were deported. Some people were placed on IV when they were during hunger strike. The force feeding threat is always there. They always use that. Some people do end up eating again because they're afraid of just imagining the idea of having a plastic tube through your nose, going through your throat all the way to your stomach. And the way they describe it is very graphic, so a lot of people decide to start eating again. Now, it's not that difficult to start a hunger strike in the detention center because the food is terrible. The quality is horrible. They make a lot of money by not providing real food. The quantities are also really bad, really small. People always report losing weight. And so the conditions are just there to make it impossible for people to fight back, to fight their cases, to try to stay. A lot of hunger strikers told us that ICE told them, if you continue the hunger strike, it's going to affect your case. You could be released if you start eating. So some people did, and they did not get released. So that's the most common thing that we see with ICE. This agency was created to destroy. It was created to damage our society. It was created to separate families, but it was created to create a private detention system to sustain it. The reason why ICE goes around and starts rounding up immigrants is because there's a local quota that ICE Seattle has with Geo-Tacoma, where they guarantee 800 people every day to be in the detention center. And that's the minimum, 800 minimum. So at the end of the day, it makes more sense for ICE to keep more people in the detention center than just the 800, because they're going to end up paying about the same amount. So there's really a profit incentive for ICE to continue rounding up my community, not only the undocumented community, but really all documented immigrants too. Anybody that is not a U.S. citizen is, at the moment, it could be deported as well. Any person that has an alien number, because that's how the government sees us as aliens. If you have any sort of criminal record nowadays, you could be placed in deportation proceedings. So this is really an attack on all immigrants, regardless really of where you come from, but most importantly, it's against people of color. We have witnessed how people of European descent that are immigrants are in the detention center have been given lower bonds in comparison to immigrants of color. So we witnessed a couple of Russians back in June that were released with a bond of $3,000, and they had a really heavy criminal record. We were happy they were released, but then we find out other people of color that had very few offenses in comparison to these other guys that they were not given a bond to be released. And in case that one was given the bond, it was $15,000. So it's very arbitrary, it's very racialized, and at the end of the day, it's not only a private system that is making sure that in this case, Geo and these other corporations end up making tons of money out of our deportation proceeding, out of the imprisonment of our bodies, but also it gives a lot of power to this agency that is out of control. It doesn't have any accountability. There's no real oversight. And they really get away with everything. I mean, the last we heard before this latest news that I'll talk about in a second is that they've been trying to ask, Homeland Security has been trying to ask permission to destroy records for the past years about sexual abuse, about suicides and attempted suicides of people that have been under custody of ICE in the past years. So that tells you the level of corruption that we're facing. So again, this agency needs to be dismantled, and we need to make sure that this hunt and this war against immigrants stop.
Doesn't Geo charge the government, I think it's like $160 per person per day? Is that right?
Yeah, I think that the last we heard it was between 165 and 185. We never get the right amount, even to get that information, even to get the contract, the latest contract that was signed in 2015 for another 10 years of operation. We haven't been able to get the whole information. But you do the math, let's say 165 times 1,575 people. That's a lot of money. So Geo has a really big interest in keeping this place running and also expanding it. The city of Tacoma passed an ordinance back in February that is going to expire anytime soon now, this September, saying that they wouldn't allow for the expansion of the current detention center or allow for a new detention center to be built in the area. But that was only a 6-month ordinance. And we've seen the city of Tacoma again and again bending over backwards to accommodate GEO. At the end of the day, city of Tacoma allowed for that building to be built in a Superfund site in the Tide Flats in an industrial zone, very inaccessible. Every time we've done actions, people always tell us we have no idea this was here. Even people that work around the areas were really surprised when they figured that there were people there. There's not a real plan for evacuation in case of a tsunami, for example. It's when it was built, there was some sort of assessment on environment impact, but not on human impact. We have seen people complaining about the water quality, water vapors, you name it. When we're outside, it's just terrible. We feel not only the smell, but the terrible quality of the air. So we started a campaign this year asking City of Tacoma to revoke GEO's business license because the mayor was on record of saying that if they found any violations of public health, they could revoke the business license for GEO. So we're saying, what are you waiting for? At least these 5 hunger strikes this year should be enough for you to revoke the business license.
I believe some of those public health issues were some of the demands when this last April, there was at least half the people there were on hunger strike and they presented a demand list. And if I remember correctly, items like that prisoners there are forced to wear the clothing of previous prisoners that has gone unwashed. So you're basically transferring, potential disease on from one person to the next.
That's right. We even posted a picture of a person with socks that are so worn out. They hardly look like socks anymore. The clothing is stained, it's old. The food is not, eatable. There were some complaints to this year when the heat wave started of not having air conditioning working. There have always been complaints about the lack of access to medical care, medical treatment. We have heard also the way people are treated by the guards, very racist, very inhumane conditions. People have also complained sometimes about the overcrowding of the facility. You name it. Every time we have a hunger strike, the list of demands keep growing. For one is the conditions, but on the other hand, we also have the immigration system itself. People don't get courts on time. Sometimes they are delayed for months. The courts, the hearings only happen for an hour and a half, so you only have an hour and a half to actually build your case. And so if their time runs out, then you probably have to wait for another 2-3 months to have another hearing. People have very little access to the law library, which is not up to date. The guards don't allow people sometimes to make copies that they require to build their cases. We know that over 90% of the people there don't even have a legal orientation, let alone a lawyer. But even if they did, it doesn't guarantee that they're going to be released. We had this famous case of the young DACA recipient early February, where he was detained in Des Moines. He made the news, and everybody was really happy when he was released. And I always use him as example. It took 16 lawyers to get him out after about 5 weeks of detention and a $10,000 bond, if I'm correct. If he, that was the poster child of the perfect immigrant, that he had 16 lawyers, he still had to pay $10,000 bond. Is there hope for the rest of us? So the system, again, is against us. The law is built against us. There's no real guarantees that having a lawyer is going to work for all of us, especially for low-income communities. And so if you see all this system built against you, and then the detention conditions that are horrible, that are made to break you, we should be so thankful and we should be so proud of the people that are still going hunger strike, because under the worst condition that anybody can imagine in this country, they're still deciding to take a step and to say, I'm going to speak up and I'm going to do something. And we hear this again and again. When people go on hunger strike, they say, this is not only about me. This is about everybody that is in this place and everybody that is going to continue being brought to this place. So it's funny because ICE and G are trying to break our spirit, and they're trying to break our humanity. And it seems that a lot of people get bigger and their humanity grows even more when they're under these horrible conditions.
What mechanisms, if any, are there for transparency for what's going on there? How do you even find out the names of people that are being held in the Tacoma facility?
Well, I think everything started with that direct action when we decided to put our bodies on the line, and people saw that and they trusted us. So since then, there's been a process for us to continue that communication, which really requires a lot of things. We have a lot of different ways to get in touch with people in detention. The main one is to continue having actions outside the detention center. We have something that we call Solidarity Days. So we ask groups to come every Saturday. So like today, we have a Solidarity Day at 1 p.m., so 1 to 4 p.m. for people that want to come at the detention center. We talk to the families. We talk to them as they go in. We tell them, hey, tell your loved ones that we're here, we're fighting. We don't want anybody detained anymore. And then when they come out, then we chat with them, and then we learn about what's going on inside. And so the families, as they go in, they tell people that think, hey, there's this bunch of people out there doing this and doing that. We also, every time there's buses bringing in people, we run to the back of the building where they're being brought in, and we chant, "You're not alone," both in English and Spanish. We bring our banners. We have even utilized a local radio station in the area in Espanol for them to listen to, because we heard that you could buy a $20 radio that is really bad quality, but it catches some signals. So we sometimes use that radio station. So we try to get also media coverage, right? Because they do have some access to some communications. We try different things. And so the way, once we're in, so our phone number is in, our email is in, people start reaching out to us, and we maintain that communication. So for us, the priority is to answer the phone. We 99% of the times answer the phone. We answer those emails, and we work in collaboration with people at the time. We always tell them we don't provide services. We're not here to save you. We're here to work with you. And so I guess that all these years, that trust that we develop, that respectful relationship that we have with them, is what maintains this work. And that's how people keep calling us. Even if they just arrive to the detention center and didn't know anything about us. Usually people call us and say, hey, I got this number, and they say that you guys are pro-immigrants. Well, what do you guys do? And so we start talking to them and explain how we work and how we collaborate with people detained and their families.
Didn't at some point in this struggle you come out and say that you are also undocumented?
That's right. So that's the reason why we did the first action in 2014, was to precisely say that we were coming out of the shadows. We were tired of being told to hide. I did a lot of work back in the day. I even became a lobbyist out of everything. I had to. Didn't like it, of course. But I tried everything that people told me that would work for us immigrants. But they were not undocumented immigrants. So I got tired, and I said, well, we have to do it our own way. We tried your way. Now we're going to do it our way. And that means coming out public. So I couldn't ask other undocumented immigrants to be bold and brave if I didn't do it. So that's how I came public back in February of 2014. And so every time people call me from the detention center, I tell them I'm undocumented. And, I could be in there, and I want to make sure that you understand where our commitment is. We could be in there as well, and we want people outside paying attention to what we're going through inside. So that's the reason why I came out as an undocumented immigrant, because I want other undocumented immigrants to lose their fear that has been infused not only by ICE, but many, many others that make money out of our presence here as undocumented immigrants.
And aren't you originally from Mexico? Can you compare the average citizen in Mexico's participation in the political process, not necessarily like voting, but I mean out in the streets process, versus those of us who grew up here in the States?
Yeah, I'm from Mexico City. I got very lucky. I grew up seeing a lot of political movements. When I remember when Occupy started here, I was like, are you kidding me? I've seen that every year when I was little in Mexico. Like, we did Occupy everywhere we went. We didn't have nonprofits to fund, organizing. It was like, you fund yourselves. You ask the community to help you go through. When people go on strikes on factories, we would go and support them. You would always see people bring them bread and blankets and, cash. And so Mexico is a really difficult place, and a lot of people complain that we are not united, but that was not my experience. My experience was that we kept resisting, and not only Mexico City, throughout the country. So when I moved to the United States, it was a big shock. I was not surprised, but it was a big shock still that there's been so little participation. I think people are way too comfortable here in the United States.
And have you noticed a positive or negative change with people's participation here in the U.S. since the current administration, the White House came in?
Oh, it's been huge. I'm really glad to see more people participating. I would like to see more people participating and not questioning our leadership. We always have people coming and saying, this is great, but have you thought about doing this? Have you called so-and-so? Why don't you guys try that? And so I think that's sometimes the problem, that people think that we are not smart enough and we don't know how we can do our own work. And that's the only problem. I think it's great to have people coming and supporting us, but they should understand that we know what we're doing and they should trust our leadership. And so that's, as a matter of fact, we are going to invite people this Tuesday to come to the ICE offices on 2nd Avenue in downtown Seattle on 1000 2nd Avenue. And we're going to be right outside the Homeland Security Investigation Office because you probably heard last week, we knew that a big, massive national immigration raid operation will be happening starting September 16th to September 21st. To detain over 8,000 people throughout the nation. We didn't want to go public because we didn't want to scare our community, because that's ICE jobs, not ours. But somebody did leak the news, and then ICE came out saying, "Oh, wait, no, I'm not doing that yet because there's the Hurricane Irma coming too," and so they didn't deny the fact that the operation exists. They're just saying they're going to delay it. Obviously, we don't believe anything that ICE says. So we actually are going to file a Freedom of Information Act right there and then this Tuesday at 11:30 in the morning. We're going to have an action starting from 11 to 1. So if people could arrive at 11, that would be great to have you all there. And basically what we're asking is, everybody says that they're with us, they want to support us. This is your chance. We're asking people to be there, but also to escalate if necessary. And like we did back in 2014, if we need to take the streets and shut down streets, we'll do it. So we hope people can come and be there with us.
All right. And how can people find out more about your work?
Well, we do have a Facebook presence called NWDC Resistance. Our website is nwdcresistance.org. And we also have a lot of actions and petitions for people at migente.net. So, but if you go to our Facebook page, you'll see everything we're doing. So Facebook NWDC Resistance.
All right. Well, with that, we are unfortunately out of time. I want to thank you very much for coming in and spending time with us this morning.
Thank you so much.